Hello everyone and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. Over the last few lessons, we have been looking at the rebuilding of the wall in Jerusalem. This wall was important because it would provide protection from attack against the city and against the temple of God. The Jews were a laughingstock in the region for not rebuilding this wall, and as we've seen thus far, the surrounding nations wanted to keep it that way. Sanballat and his followers have been taunting the Jews and even threatened to attack them. This required Nehemiah to set a guard in order to protect the builders and ensure the wall's continued construction. Let's continue on with chapter 4 to see what happens next. So if you have a Bible with you, turn to the book of Nehemiah to chapter 4. We're going to be reading from verses 10 to 23. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Nehemiah chapter 4, beginning at verse 10. Then Judah said, "The strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall." And our adversaries said, "They will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease." So it was, when the Jews who dwelt near them came, that they told us 10 times, "From whatever place you turn, they will be upon us." Therefore I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, and to the rest of the people, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses." And it happened, when our enemies heard that it was known to us, and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, every one to his work. So it was from that time on that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held spears, the shields, the bows, and wore armor. And the leaders were behind all the houses of Judah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction, and with the other held a weapon. Every one of the builders had his sword girded at his side as he built, and the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. Then I said to the nobles, the rulers, and the rest of the people, "The work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." So we labored in the work, and half of the men held the spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time I also said to the people, "Let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem, that they may be guard by night and a working party by day." So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that every one took them off for washing. Having to set a guard meant that men were being taken from the work of rebuilding the wall to do that work that was already immense, and so the complaint seems to be that the remaining laborers are becoming too tired to continue. And it also seemed that the psychological warfare waged against them by their enemies was working on some, in spite of Nehemiah's prayers to God. Even the report of some Jews of the neighboring cities of impending attacks seemed to be a discouragement. Now, depending on which translation you're reading, you might get a different sense of what verse 12 means. In the New King James Version that we read, verse 12 says, "So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came, that they told us 10 times, 'From whatever place you turn, they will be upon us.'" However, if you read the ESV, it would say, "At that time the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, 'You must return to us.'" The meaning of these two translations is a little different, with the New King James stating that people came to give reports of the impending war to the builders, intelligence that was sorely needed, while the ESV seems to imply the same thing, taking it a step further by telling us that because of these threats, those Jews should return to their cities lest they die and leave their families in hardship. The reason for the difference is depending on which manuscript tradition you use. In verse 12, it is uncertain as to what the book of Nehemiah originally said here, and so different manuscript traditions translated to what we do have it slightly differently. But whichever is correct doesn't change the fact that the builders were being told that Sanballat and his followers were planning an attack. And both possibilities fit with Nehemiah's response, for the reports were discouraging everyone. Personally, I believe that the New King James Version is closer to the original, but if you disagree with me, that's okay, for no doctrine of Scripture and no contradiction to the text is introduced, no matter which is correct. The original Hebrew was correct, for it was divinely inspired. However, a later copyist error seems to have introduced some variance into the text that it is difficult for us, at the moment, to figure out which is correct. Nehemiah wasn't going to be deterred, though. He gathered the people together and told them that God is great and powerful and will protect them, as well as their families, from their enemies during this building project, should they continue it, that is. Their cause was righteous. Therefore, God will bless the work of their hands. Therefore, they can also have both builders and guards and be able to complete the work. Those who worked at actually constructing the wall would use both their hands, but have their sword girded on their side. However, those involved in carrying materials either to or from the building site, they would do so with one hand, while having their sword in the other hand ready for battle. At the lower parts of the wall, meaning the parts of the wall that were at lower elevation, Nehemiah positioned men in order to provide protection. But because the wall wasn't being built a section at a time, rather all at once, the entire unit of builders was separated from one another, making them vulnerable for attack. Therefore, Nehemiah carried a trumpeter with him as he surveyed the work. And so, if they heard the trumpet, they were to drop their work and come and fight at the position of the trumpet sound. God would be with them in battle, and so they knew they would be successful. And so the work on the wall continued, with half laboring in work and half holding spears from daybreak until evening. This work didn't even afford them of returning to tents or neighboring towns. Rather, the builders and their servants were to remain in Jerusalem so that the work could continue quickly. As for Nehemiah and his entourage of servants and guards, their overseeing the work did not allow them to leave either, even for a change of clothes. So none of them took their clothes off save for the time that they washed them. That was the dedication shown by the Jews here in continuing to repair the wall in Jerusalem. In chapter 5, Nehemiah is going to be dealing with a problem that has arisen in Judah that needed to be corrected if the people were to be following the law of Moses correctly. We'll find out what that problem is, as well as how Nehemiah handled it, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope to join us for tomorrow's discussion of Nehemiah chapter 5, verses 1 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.